Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. When it comes to EVE news, I think we have still been dominated by the controversy of the mining pack, where CCP for the first time sold a fully fitted retriever as part of a supporter pack that players could purchase. And we also got a response on the forums from CCP Swift after like an open letter from the CSM, basically saying that this was a red line that they should not have crossed. And I think that the response will be disappointing for those that were hoping that CCP would basically come out and say, all right, we understand that this was a mistake and we're never gonna do it again. In fact, it's the exact opposite. CCP pretty much said that they are going to continue creating packs that will boost new players or will give new players the option of getting ahead and finding their way into the game that way. As I said a little bit in the previous video on that topic as well, I think that this is something we'll have to accept. Things are changing, even the gaming landscape is changing, and I myself remember very, very clearly that I was keeping a close eye on New World for a pretty long time, until they just straight out said the exact same thing before the game was even out, where they said, yeah, our plans, our roadmap for the longer term of the game is that at some point in the future we will consider that certain content has matured enough that we can now sell the armor sets, for instance, directly to players that want to start playing New World at that point later in the game, perhaps per expansion, whatever it is. But yeah, pay to catch up is basically something that is more and more accepted. I think has also been tried a lot of times and will probably be successful. In the post it was even mentioned that the Destroyer pack was considered to be very successful by CCP, which is kind of weird that for a more veteran player, why the hell would you pay money to get a Destroyer? But yeah, it looks like pay to catch up is something that we have to realize is coming, is here to stay, and will be part of the experience, EVE experience going forward. They did mention that they were going to announce something at FanFest that would sort of implied that the stuff being sold in those future packs would have at least some input from players or something like that. We'll have to wait on the details. Some people are speculating that this will go to a play to earn model. I honestly don't think so, unless it all remains in-game, for instance that you can sell ships to CCP for plex or something like that, but that you'll get actual money out of it, I really don't think so, because there's like tax stuff that would need to be sorted with all the different countries for that players actually live in. So I really don't think that that's going to be the case, but overall, yeah, a little bit in line with my expectation. We should expect more of this. And secondly, of course, I'm personally going to see what exactly their plans are there that they will announce at FanFest, and see how we handle that type of stuff, because I do have a lot of stuff in EVE Online. Who knows what's gonna happen that way. Anyways, yeah, that's it mostly for the news. I think it was basically the topic that dominated. There's probably some other development stuff, economic numbers and things like that that came out, but it didn't really grab my attention all that much. So let's move on to the New Eden store, quickly see what's happening over here. We get a sale 1 month Omega with a free Kestrel skin, 12 month Omega with free skins, a pack of different ones. Alright, well, there you go. That's a sale that's happening for some Omega time. I think there's like a frigate event happening at the moment. Here, nothing special, and on the services, the sales are here as well. Alright, that means that we get to move on to the market. As always, we start with plex and stuff, and that is coming in at 420. Rant out of the way. Let's start here with the plex part. 3.1 million for the sellers. You can see on the chart that we are spiking up again, but hesitating to get those average prices substantially above 3 million just yet. Still, we're very close to the 1-year high point, so plex are very expensive. So 3.1 million for the sellers, buyers in Giza almost 3 million. And if we go for the player-owned trade hubs, competition I think will be very close to those numbers. Yeah, exactly. We we jump up just a little bit or push up just a little bit on the buyer side, and then the sellers are right at that 3.1 million mark. I think that the plex for good is going to be a part of the equation here, an important part of the equation. Since that's running, it is more demand, and it does siphon out, of course, plex out of circulation. That generally means lower supply, thus higher prices. The multiple pilot train certificate is still staying very flat, which is a little bit of a surprise. I would expect a little bit more pressure from what's happening with plex at the moment. We're staying below 1.3 billion on this one, just below that for the sellers, and buyers are above 1.2 billion. So the margin is clearly closing. We are going to keep pushing those average prices closer and closer to those sellers, and eventually we will break through the 1.3 billion, and then we might just be going up towards 1.4 decently quickly. The skill extractor market is responding, you could say, to everything that's happening in the plex market. Pretty much a one-year high point. At least these data points here, these daily averages at 360 million are at that place. Sellers coming in at 355, pretty much a little bit above 350, and buyers at 344. So there is a little bit of selling pressure happening here, which I think is the difference between plex and the skill extractors, right? You're not giving away skill extractors for plex for good, and so that is will keep things in check a little bit. But overall, again, very high prices. Then we have the injectors. Will they continue their downtrend despite the pressure? Yes, here it is, the large scale injectors going down. I'm not really sure if this is just a continuation of players having settled into the new meta of mining. I think that's a big part as to why we had a strong demand in October, November, early December. CCP had announced that there was going to be the mining revamp, and so lots of players already speculating, yeah, my Rorcal pilot might need to extract that one and then get some large skill injectors ready in order to get into the new skills that are needed, including, of course, the new refining skills, and then also now the new compression skills. So there is a little bit of extra demand that was created, or expected demand that was created here for the large scale injectors, and the market does try to stay ahead of the curve, and now I think we're slowly getting through everything. Another thing that's very noticeable on the daily login rewards, I'm getting lots of expert packs and things like that. And yeah, if CCP basically now says that, yeah, we're going to continue to help new players, we are going to continue to basically allow them to buy, to pay to catch up in the game, that will in all likeliness include stuff like skill point packs or skill plans that they can just inject and then have them. And so the demand for large skill injectors or skill injector skill points in general may be going down on all of those plans as well. Perhaps the market is looking forward and seeing that on the horizon. Small skill injectors, I don't expect them to really be able to buck the trend. Well, they did have a little bit of a bounce back to a 135 million, I think this is, but you can see that the downward trend is basically still dominating here as well. 129 million for the sellers, 120 million for the buyers. And then we get the daily alpha injectors that may have a little bit of a different story. Well, actually, there we go, interesting, these are going down all of a sudden as well. Not really sure where this is coming from. Sellers still above 45, yeah, 46.5, buyers at 42 million. Perhaps someone came in and dumped enough of them to push the average prices down, so enough of them just being sold straight to the buyers. I do think that we might see a little bit of that happening here and there as players are liquidating some of their holdings in order to participate in Plex for good, perhaps also as a form of protest if they then decide not to continue playing the game because of all of the changes that are announced. So here, very sharp downwards move, like 43 million down here on those daily averages, but you can see that the sellers, right, they're still well above 45 million, so that must mean quite a bit of action happening here to those buyers. Yeah, a little bit of a dump in the daily alpha injectors. I think we'll move our way back up very quickly though, as those efforts don't tend to last too long. And then finally we get the hypercores that spiked up to a 1-year high point above 330,000 ISK and is now coming back down to a still very, very high price point. 320,000 for the sellers, 280 for the buyers. So hypercores are in demand at the moment. Next we have the mineral market coming in at 10 minutes. There we go. Yeah, you might already have seen that on the ticker, but bad news for titanium that just broke through the 4.5, and sometimes, right, those round numbers that are defended by the market for a little bit are important, and probably there's like a psychological effect or something like that, because once they're broken we go down very quickly, and that's exactly what's happening here. Last week we could still sell above 4.5, and now in GDA we're down to 4.2 pretty much, so sellers are just desperate to get rid of their titanium, willing to cut down on the price quite severely, and the buyers are coming in at 413, so we're staying above 4 for now, but if this has any more momentum that can be very dangerous. Unfortunately, I would say that your titanium, be willing to put some aside for better times. I think prices above 4.5 to 5 can definitely come back on enough demand, for instance, for large ship construction and things like that. Then we've got the pyrite market that's also taking another dump. That's a little bit unexpected in my book, because we already had the correction and we finally start to move sideways at our new price range. But no, we are now down to 1160 for the sellers and below 10 ISK for the buyers. That is another one that I would personally not sell unless I absolutely had to. I would be hoarding my pyrite at the moment, hoping for better times later down the line. And let's see if Mexelon can then survive the pressure. Well, it's definitely doing well, staying above 75 ISK on the average prices, 76 for the sellers and 74 for the buyers. So I would say that it's pretty obvious, if you're mining in HiSec, your focus is Mexelon. Try to find sources for that, because apparently demand for this is still high in the industry cycles that are happening at the moment, but quite a bit of supply increase all of a sudden for titanium and pyrite that is looking for new and lower, much lower I would say, average prices at the moment. So for HiSec, Mexelon is your focus. Then for low-sec we've got Isogen that is continuing its relentless march up in price, in line with, of course, in my opinion, my read on the market, that we are slowly starting to feel that active supply demand start to decide on the price, as it's slower. A slower supply of those old reserves is starting to show up here with lower volumes, probably also lower response times to those higher prices. It used to be, oh, we go up 10 ISK. Well, there we go. I'm dumping immediately a lot of my Isogen. I think the market and the players have learned that, yeah, maybe a little bit of patience can get us more ISK down the line. And so we're at 220 for the sellers, 206 for the buyers. You can see those buyers are forced up, clearly showing that the dynamic here is switching. As long as we had those massive reserves still out there that were constantly putting a very strong ceiling on how high the prices could go, buyers had this opportunity to basically lower their price as well, as you know, any new sellers would constantly have to bump in against that massive volume of Isogen. But the dynamic, the psychology here is clearly switching to one where, yeah, if you want Isogen, you gotta bring it in from low sec, which means that you are going to dictate the price. You're not going to dump to buyers unless they go very close to your price range. And the fact that they've been forced up to above 200 ISK already, I think is quite significant, and a show of that. Volume wise, I mean, there's still Isogen out there. Let's not kid ourselves about that. 100 million here, 640 million here, several 1020s coming in here as well, but it's clearly slowing down, and you can see the volumes of those that are competing at the lower prices are a couple of million in size, which I think is what can be managed relatively stably from low sec But tens, 20s, and certainly not hundreds of millions are something that will slowly erode away as the prices keep going up. Then we've got the Noxium chart that's actually seeing a little bit of upwards pressure as well in the last couple of days, back to 1400 for the sellers, 1362 for the buyers, exactly the dynamic that I was talking about here. Those buyers are not going to be really able to put pressure on this market to crash the price or anything like that. It's the sellers that actually risk it to go into low sec in order to source Noxium and then actually also take the effort to bring it into JITA to sell it on this market. They are dictating the price because they are taking the risks and they are putting in all of the effort. Then for nullsec, we've got Zydrine that actually is shooting up here as well, going up to 1160 for the sellers. Buyers still below 1000 disk. You can immediately, in my opinion, feel a little bit of a different dynamic, different market for Zydrine and Megasite. Although the margin will eventually close, it is a little bit slower, and that, in my opinion, is because we are talking basically a more robust machine of supply that exists with larger groups in nullsec that basically have those regular trips. It'll exist in lowsec as well, but there's always, I think, a little bit more of a risk factor to bringing in supplies or to creating trade routes, you would say, between lowsec and JITA compared to nullsec and JITA. And as a result, I think here buyers are actually able to be a little bit less responsive to those price shocks, expecting that maybe there's enough big players out there that will actually bring that price back down to a more reasonable level or closer to the previous level. But Zydrine taking off to 1163 all of a sudden is another sharp increase in price, and we've seen that in Megasite as well, where it has stabilized in the last 2 weeks already, basically not moving from this price point, which is a 970 for the sellers, 795 for the buyers. And you can see that the supplies are basically saying this is the price we want. Buyers can try to ask for 800 disk Megasite, but the average price is right here at the 970 range, and so this is just not working. Buyers will be forced to go up and up and up in order to actually grab that Megasite. I don't expect nullsec to crash their own price, their own market at this point. And so for Zydrine, my honest expectation is that we will start to move sideways very quickly. We probably won't see sellers go back to 1000 disk, and we will see buyers slowly, because they would obviously love to keep getting their regular cheap Zydrine, relatively cheap Zydrine from nullsec, but they'll be forced up slowly, and that's how that gap will be closed. Whereas Noxium, for instance, the buyers are far more responsive, pushing straight up into those 1400s very quickly. Finally, we've got the Morphite market that is continuing its decline. We are talking about 41,500 for the sellers and 37,500 for the buyers. Here, we basically have the most expensive mineral that is the focus of whenever and wherever it's available, and thus that its availability has actually gone up substantially, which is putting continued pressure on the price. Next up, we've got the PI market at 1755. Let's see what's happening here. Last week, a good week, I would say. Definitely some high prices here and there. And for broadcast nodes, not bad. We're still, I think, playing with 1.7 million for the sellers. Almost that here for the sellers. Buyers coming in at 1.5 million. A little bit more aggressive buying here, and my anecdotal evidence that there is basically more industry happening at the moment in the game, especially bigger industry, is that BPCs, although they are still not selling very quickly, prices have gone up. BPCs for freighters are up substantially in price, and I'm also looking into making a dreadnought batch so that I can get a feel of that market. But I would say there is in nullsec quite a bit of production that is happening at the moment, and I think that is in part why we see this more aggressive buying and these higher prices for a lot of the advanced PI materials. But across the board, we've been doing quite well. We're seeing a little bit of pressure on the construction blocks, but sellers are able to stay above 8k, 8,500 even, and buyers at 7.5. They're opening a little bit of a margin, but a margin of 1,000 disk is not crazy in these refined PI materials. So I would say definitely still not bad for construction blocks, probably suffering a little bit from some quick dumping that's happening to the buyers here on, well, these higher prices compared to most of last year. Consumer electronics had made its way to 8,000 disc, is giving back quite a bit of that. We're staying at 7.3 for the sellers, 6,600 for the buyers, and you can see that demand can still dry up here, putting pressure on the price. Still, consumer electronics went as low as 5,000 discs, so this is still not that bad of a price. Coolants is continuing its very strong streak. We even have higher volumes that will be pushing the price up again. 11,200 for the sellers and 9,600 for the buyers. The buyers are opening up a little bit of margin here. I do think that demand may not be holding on for all that much longer, but for now, yeah, Coolants selling for 11,200 is definitely a great price. Cryoprotect and Solutions building to an even higher price point, 1 year high point at 190,000 ISK, sellers coming in at 134. Not the dynamic that I was expecting. If you guys have any answer, is there something with the compression stuff that requires implants, or is there a reward or something like that that's happening here again? But this must be something in game, I think, that is triggering all of this extra demand. Well, I would say if you have been super patient, which I would not have been, I'll be honest, and you still have some cryoprotectant solutions that you bought, let's say 6 or 10 months ago for probably 90,000 ISK or something like that, you've got your sell opportunity where you're doubling your investment. Not bad, great sell opportunity, and cryoprotectant solutions at its super pronounced 1 year high point. Enriched uranium also taking off on massive volumes. 14,750 for the sellers, 10,500 for the buyers. This has been a very long time since we've seen this pattern. Supply is the problem here. We just don't have enough enriched uranium in GDA anymore, and prices have been able to jump up to 15k pretty much, something we haven't seen in a very long time for a refined PI material. So things are clearly still moving quite a lot in this market. Then we get the integrity response drones that are seeing a little bit of pressure, but staying above 1.5. Yeah, actually 1.7 million for the sellers and 1.5 million for most buyers is still a pretty decent price, I would say. Not the best, right? We've been close to 2 million through that amazing summer, but I think being able to hold on to that 1.5 is not bad. Mechanical parts continuing an upwards trajectory as well, playing with 10,000 disc on a couple of days here, and exactly here we go, sellers 10,000 disc for mechanical parts, 8.6 for the buyers. Well, as a producer of mechanical parts and coolants, this of course is very good news. Massive comeback here, back to, well, from my historical perspective, normal average prices for both coolants and mechanical parts, and a real breakout, even historically speaking, for enriched uranium, because this is more expensive than any of its averages, in my opinion. So that's tied to fuels. Here are the nanites, really not able to do all that much, 5.7 to 5.2, so it's not uniformly across the board that we've got amazingly good prices, but at least on this 1 year chart, it's hovering at the high end. Then we get our nano factories that are recovering from a spike from about a week ago, went up to 1.5 million on the 5-day moving average. That was not meant to last all that long. In fact, some sellers coming in at 900,000 disc already, buyers at 650, so we don't have enough demand to really sustain much higher prices at the moment. Then we've got organic motor applicators also not doing that well, 700,000 to 640, clearly at the lower end of its range. Recursive computing modules, couple more months guys, and we get our better charts back above 1 million and able to stay there, so that's not that bad. 1.1 million, a little bit above that for the sellers, and buyers at almost 1 million. The robotics, kind of interested in this one. Yeah, I thought maybe seeing what coolants had done, seeing what mechanical parts and enriched uranium had done, maybe we would see some purchasing of robotics in order to produce all of that fuel, but no, still at 70k, which on the 1 year chart is not bad. but on the historical perspective, is still about 30% below its normal price. 70,000 for the sellers, 68,000 for the buyers, so very, very narrow margin though. A breakout could happen in robotics, in my opinion. Self-harmonizing power core also recovering from a spike up to 2 million on daily averages, back down to 1.5, buyers at 1.3. You can see demand is not that strong that you're going to substantially or that you're going to build on a 1-year high point or anything like that. It is going to be crushed in by supply very quickly, but the fact that this happens is pretty important, I think. Then we got sterile conduits, and this one is actually able to build on an increased price, but it's relative, right? 1.1 million is not a 1-year high point. We are there now though. Sterile conduits selling for almost 1.4 million and buyers forced up to 1.2 million, but I think that we will see a little bit of supply take advantage of this pretty quickly. Yukomi superconductors staying above 70,000 ISK, pretty stable and flat, 70 to 80k, that's its range. It's right in the middle of that, not much to say here. And then finally the wetware mainframes, one exception, a 1-year low point. Coming in at 1.25 million for one seller, 1.4 for most, so this could rectify decently quickly. But a 1.1 million for the buyers, showing that demand just isn't there. Right, quick drink, and then the next one. Which is advanced moon materials coming in at 25.50. There we go. So last week was not great, a lot of really low prices, although it is great if you're looking for cheap Tech 2 ships, yeah, crystalline carbonite still stuck at the 125 range, basically not moving anywhere. 129 to 118 for the buyers, very cheap. Next we've got titanium carbide for Caldari. Look at that, 1-year low point actually, going down to a 136 for the sellers, but a 118 also for the buyers. And the fact that we get this average down here does mean that there are people that are selling to those buyers below 120 for titanium carbide. That is extremely low as well. Then we get ferrite carbide for Minmatar, continued pressure, 1-year low point. I hope I mentioned it. I do think I mentioned it, but yeah, while last week looked really good to jump in on some medium to long-term investments in advanced moon materials, you know, never put all the ISK in a single purchase, because you never know when something like this happens. And we're at another 1-year low point. Ferrite carbide going down, 120 for the sellers, 116 once again for the buyers. So that 120 range and buying below is clearly very popular at the moment. And then we've got tungsten carbide for Amar, that's going even lower, another 1-year low point, 113 to 105 for the sellers. Probably massive oversupply of advanced moon materials. I think, yeah, the forges are not the only thing, right? It's not just industry gnostic that is picking up quite substantially, but mining as well, including moon mining, which is creating all of this big supply and thus these low prices. Let's see if the metamaterials can hold on a little bit better, but that's a lot of 1-year low points. So we got photonic metamaterials for Galente, back above 10k for the sellers, 10.7 for the sellers, but also 9.6 for the buyers. So this is clearly also the low range. At least we haven't crashed down even lower this week. Then we've got Caldari non-linear metamaterials going back down towards the lowest end of the range, right below 17.5. Sellers coming in at 18.6, but buyers at 16.7. And in order to create these averages, you get mostly selling happening to these buyers. So I would say non-linear metamaterials is under pressure as well and trading very low, just not as bad as the carbides. Then we've got the plasmonic metamaterials for Minmatar, 1-year low point below 15k, 14,100 now for the sellers, 14,000 for the buyers. That is definitely a low range as well. And then we've got terahertz metamaterials for Amar, landing on 12.5 even, 13.5 for the sellers, 12.5 for the buyers. So with these averages, there is still enough supply out there that is sellers directly selling to these buyers that are creating the average prices. That's pretty impressive, and I think that you know, that's going to potentially mean even more sales in the Tech 2 ship market, where I gotta say this exact same warning again. If you're looking for the bargains there, make sure that you still keep some of your powder dry, because right now all of this is indicating even lower prices there. Let's see what the other ones are doing. A little bit in line with my expectation, although it takes a little bit longer, right? We've got fermion and condensates that did have a 1-year high point, jumped up to like 90k almost on the 5-day moving average, but it does get absorbed by supply very quickly, taking advantage of any spike like that. It just took like 2 weeks, which honestly is a little bit longer than what I expected, but now we're back down to 59,000 for the sellers, 55,000 for the buyers, so we're trading completely below that 60k mark, which is well below average once again. It could just be that there is a little bit of time delay between an opportunity like that showing up in JITA and the supplies actually coming in from all of the moon mining that needs to happen or that has happened, but you know, stuff might be in transit a little bit. Then we've got Ferrogel, which was not doing great last week and is doing even worse now, going down to 25k, 1-year low point. Less than that for the sellers, 23.6 for the buyers. Fullerite, yeah, it's going to become a trend here, unfortunately. 1-year low point below 650 now at 625. Just 0 buyers, 535 for Fullerites. You can grab some really cheap stuff, but again, I would say the way I would do it is basically have an amount of ISK that you feel comfortable that, all right, if it's still not the best purchase, that's okay. Let's say 100 million. I'd put up a buy or try to grab 100 million in Fullerites, maybe even just 50 million if you expect prices to go even lower, something like that. Then we get hypersynaptic fibers, 1-year low point going below 8,000 ISK now, 7.9 for the sellers to 7.5 for the buyers. Nano transistors back at the 1-year low point on big volumes, very interesting. 3.4 for the sellers, 3.1 for the buyers. Yeah, that's pretty low as well. Phenolic composites bumping from that 1,000 ISK. So here the market saying, yeah, maybe we should try to grab some of that. Exactly in line with what I would do, by the way. Make a purchase, but be careful. You know, we could go lower. 1,000 ISK could get broken on this as well. Pressurized oxidizers, so that's one of those new ones. Need to see what's happening here. Yeah, a little bit of pressure, but 10k still in play. Reinforced carbon fiber is also, yeah, heading towards that 10,000 ISK. If we can go below that, that would be interesting. Then we get our ceramic fibers finally. Another step down, heading to 200 ISK here, 230 to 220, 1-year low point once again. So advanced moon materials, yeah, the 1-year low point story, but it might not be over just yet, as this is the situation that we find ourselves in. I would say a lot of moon mining is happening, creating this massive oversupply. What's the impact on Tech 2 ships? Coming in at 32.20. There we go. As always, we start with the Basilisk. That, yeah, is trending down even lower again as well. 161 for the sellers, 142 million for the buyers. That is obviously very, very low. If you try to get a 1.4 to show up, the entire chart is gone, and this is where the buyers are at. So yeah, I'm going to warn you guys, at some point this is going to stop and it's going to reverse, and then your buy opportunity will be over. And I'll give this warning again as well. It's on this side of the downtrend that you have the best chance to pick up on the buy orders. Once you're back on this part of the chart, then you're just not gonna trigger buy orders unless you go super aggressive. So this really, to me, is the time to look into the cheap Tech 2 Basilisks here. You are able to go very aggressive. You're able to buy below 150. That was even a daily average. But you can also see right at the tail end here, it might be a fake out like here, but it is trying to form a bottom, so we might already be just too late for the very best purchases of the Basilisk. But eventually we will form bottom here. Then we got the Cerberus. That one is right where you want right now. This is still going down under pressure, and we're at 162 for the sellers and 155 for the buyers. So you're easily buying a Cerberus below 160. Try to get that on the chart, so below 160 down here. You're picking that up pretty damn easily, which I think is the time to jump in. I'm just gonna say it. Then we get the Guardian that bumped up from that 160 range. I mean, it's not going to break out to 200. Don't expect this to be something that, oh, in a couple of weeks I'm going to have massive profits. Unless CCP announces something crazy at FanFest for Take 2. I don't expect that to happen, but these are now the time to buy super cheap Take 2 ships, potentially to fly as well, of course, but you know, to wait for big Gnostic conflict or something like that. Logistics cruisers can go crazy high, and you can get some crazy margins at these prices, 163 and still 157 for the buyers. So you're still trying to buy a Guardian below 160 million, but you can see on these daily averages, it's gonna be harder and harder to actually materialize that. The Hound, that's nice, breaking the 20 million. I've been waiting for that. This to me would be a no-brain jumping point. Sellers below 20 million, buyers at 18.3. Yeah, that stealth bomber below 20 million has even historically been like, okay, that's definitely something we can trade with. Is the Icatursa seeing pressure as well? Yep, it is seeing pressure here as well. Less than 600 million for the sellers and way below 500 million for the buyers. Now, this one, try to buy below 500 million. On an upswing, it could be really good, but it is, of course, you know, for people with slightly bigger wallets, I would say, that are able to say, all right, I'll risk a trade with $500 million ISK here, because it might go down on all this continued Take 2 pressure. It is a little bit unique though. It is tied to Truglavian materials as well, which is Bogven. Who knows how that will play out. Ishtar was a terrible chart last week if you're looking for better prices or higher prices, but here we go, 170 still on the downtrend, and that's that fake out that I was talking about. How much below 170 are we now? 172 for the sellers, 161 for the buyers, and you're probably able to buy very close to that price. Then we've got the Manticore. Still seeing pressure, but not as fast as what I would like to see. I would love to just push straight through that to 22.5 and start playing with 20 million. That's not happening just yet. 23.4 for the sellers, 22.6 for the buyers. Now, the Manticore has always been a little bit more expensive. You don't have a lot of demand. So I would definitely say if you want to be ready, if you want to have something, then you can definitely jump in now and try to buy, let's say, below 23 million. But I would then make sure that I keep an eye on this, because perhaps later down the line, something like what happens with the Hound could still be possible. And then there's a better jumping point. I think last week the Nemesis was where we wanted. Munin 150 average just a couple of days ago, 160 to 145. So buying below 150 should still be possible for the Munin as well. And then the Nemesis last week, or no, that's 2 weeks ago. Went down well below 20 million, recovered a little bit, right? So here are the players that have bought those cheap Nemesis, but the pressure is back on already. So we're at 20 million for the sellers and 16 million for the buyers. Yeah, this is another one where you can definitely try to grab a couple of cheap Nemesis stealth bombers, yet again well below 20 million. The Oneros also crawling back a little bit from a 1-year low point, touched 130 million on daily averages a couple of times, and here we're at 151 to 127, so you're still able to compete with that. But again, on this upswing, it's going to be harder to grab a buy order, but it is still possible, so definitely really low. Panther now below $1 billion for a full week on the daily averages. I think this really does show that the story here in Take 2 is a little bit different. It is just cheaper to make them at the moment because of what's happening in advanced materials. Even the larger Take 2 ships, like these battleships, are now selling at $1 billion or just below that, and buyers going down to 950 million. Purifier touching 20 million, very nice as well. On the average price, 20.6 for the sellers, 17 million for the buyers. Another stealth bomber jumping point in my opinion, but again, with the ability to buy more later down the line. Scimitar, 1-year low point, that's a pretty serious crash. 147 for the sellers and below 140 for the buyers. A scimitar below 140, that sounds pretty good to me as well. Even the widow is now below a billion on average. A billion for the sellers, 926 million for the buyers. And then we get the zealot that also recovered from a 1 year low point, 173 to 158. So this is that same story. You're still buying below that 1 year low point, but at the moment the averages are back up because no one is just, you know, desperately dumping those zealots. But it could happen again. That's basically what's happening with the Ishtar here. And also what's happening with the Nemesis. So yeah, it's in my opinion the right time to look for Tech 2 ship purchases pretty much across the board. But make sure that you put up that buy order, try to buy below the entire chart, and then have that patience to buy well within your means, so that you could double down and try to buy even lower if that's the option potentially later. But eventually we will, and I think like the basilisk here, we will start to form a real bottom, and that's always very tricky to try and actually spot. Next up, the Tech 3 ships coming in at 40.10, let's say. There we go, as always the destroyer. So we still had that disconnect between Confessor, Hecate, Jackdaw, and then the Zweipel doing its own thing, being terrible, really not in demand at all. But interesting, here is the Confessor actually going below 50 million for the first time in 1.5 months. And last week we didn't see that much supply to make this happen. 49 million for the sellers, 50 for most, and 45 million for the buyers. And look at that, last 24 hours, last 48 hours, not a single Confessor coming to the market. That is interesting. So sellers are not just willing to go crazy on the downside for the Confessor. It's basically a lack of demand in Tech 3 cruisers here that is pushing the price back down. The Hecate is still able to defend 50 million, but will probably absorb more supply because of this. Yeah, 51 for the sellers, 47 for the buyers. But you can see here half a page of new Hecates coming in. Is going to continue to put pressure on the price, and I find this very interesting actually. Let's first take a look at the Jackdaw. That's still at 55 million and is going back up. So we should see not that much supply, but it should take in a lot of supply next. 47 million for the buyers. And this is interesting because we do see here a 8 million margin that opens up on that slight uptick in price. Here we have a 5 million margin, and here we also have a 4-5 million margin, which is actually I think a little bit more than what we're generally used to, especially here in the Confessor. And so this does also show that the demand side of the equation is pretty important and can have a big influence on the price. And I think this is how that Confessor just dropped below 50 million for the average price, despite the fact that the Hecate and the Jackdaw even made its way up towards 55 million for the sellers yet again. So it seems to really be the demand side that can cause the disconnect between the ships, because this also feels like Jackdaw going up. How the hell does the Confessor then drop off like that? It's because demand just isn't as strong, and differences there can really impact that complete market. And then unfortunately I expect bad news for the Zweipel. Yeah, this was clearly going to happen here. If demand is even dropping off for the Confessor, and it's really the Jackdaw, which in my opinion is the strongest platform in, it's just easy, it's great PvE platform, missiles, super long range if you want to, very tanky, very fast, great platform. I love the Jackdaw. It is by far my favorite Tech 3 destroyer, but if the Confessor starts to drop off, then yeah, demand for the Zweipel is gonna go completely nuts, will be completely decimated, and that's exactly what's happening here. Average price is below 42.5 million, 42 million for the sellers, 40 million for one buyer, and then going down to 38 million already. And so very interesting. I would say that the disconnect is actually created by the demand side that's spitting out this Zweipel saying zero interest in that ship anymore, and even the Confessor is now starting to struggle to stay relevant in the meta, in demand, in the minds of players. I don't know exactly what's behind all of this, of course, but it is quite noticeable that you have this disconnect in how the chart moves and in the price compared to the others that are staying popular. When this happens here, you've got that sharp demand drop off. Next up, you get the cruisers. Here is the Legion. Did make its way back to 190, so this was a doable trade, right? Buy well below 180 when the chart hits 180, sell at the 190. But yeah, potentially we are seeing some real dumping happening here at the moment. 172 for the sellers, 63 million for the buyers is very, very cheap all of a sudden as well. And this does feel like potentially there's more going on because that's a sharp drop off to 1 year low points. The Loki also dropping off from another spike early March. Still holding on to a decent price range though, I would say. 190 for the sellers, 174 for the buyers, another pretty wide margin though. Then we get the Proteus holding on as well, 188 to 173, that's actually decently reasonable. And then finally the Tengu that went down substantially last week is clawing its way back a little bit, 192 to 175. So big margins here between sellers and buyers in these cruisers, quite a bit of volatility. Is it tradable? The Legion had a trade that was doable and recognizable over the last month or so, but this is worrying me. This is definitely worrying me, this new 1 year low point and these opening margins on the downside on a lot of these. I would not be too eager to jump in on some Tech 3 cruiser trading right now. And finally, we've got the extra product for the week. I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to cover all of that, but I'm gonna just pick some because someone requested I take a look at some mining equipment, considering, of course, again, the pack that CCP sold to see if there's an impact on the market. I think that's an interesting request. So 4540. I would say strip miners have to be part of that package. So let's do a thing here. We've got these. We'll start with the strip miner 1, actually holding on quite well. I think that will have been what is part of the package. Not sure if they'll sell Tech 2 stuff right away, but strip miners are well above average, well above 3 million at the moment, and are selling for 3.2, buyers coming in at 2.8. We'll take a quick look at the strip miner 2s. Those are under pressure, and that's the story in Tech 2, of course. Advanced moon materials are massively under pressure, and that is creating these nice cheap Tech 2 items. So modulated strip miner 2, 5.5 million, buyers coming in at, well, 4.8 million for most, let's say. Deep core strip miner 2, same story here, 5 million, so definitely pretty cheap, 1 year low point pretty much, but not a lot of trade spiking opportunity in this one, but definitely really cheap as well under all of that moon mining that's happening. And we'll take a quick look at the ore strip miner as well. Well, faction, right? If then you want to be better than everyone else, then you have to go faction, and it looks like wallets are deep enough that there is strong demand for this one. We can also very clearly see the patch here, the announcement first and then the patch hitting early November, the announcement, massive volumes, massive price response. Here is the patch day, massive volumes, massive price response when the meta switched from Orcas Rorquals to mining barges for the better yields, and we are still basically absorbing that, meaning 214 million for the sellers, 185 million for the buyers. Bit of margin opening up here. I do think we'll start to see a little bit of pressure, but that is of course quite expensive. This is basically a Tech 2 ship in a single module. I think there were also mining upgrades that are part of this. Not gonna look at the crystals, but mining laser upgrade. There we go. I think that's part of most mining barges as well. slight upwards price, but pretty average for the Tech 1 version, which is actually very affordable, of course. 40k for the sellers, 20k for the buyers. Let's see what the Tech 2 one is doing. Bit of a spike here in December, which again is patch day, of course, when CCP changed the mining meta, going from 900,000 disk to a 1.5 million high point. But all of this has been absorbed, and all of the advanced moon mining that's happening at the moment is basically creating 1 year low points, very cheap mining laser upgrade 2s as well. 800,000 for the sellers, 700,000 for the buyers. That is decently doable. There's a couple of factions. I've never used those myself, but definitely want to take a look at that. 40 million for an Ayud or something like that. Mining laser upgrade. For an 80 million, excuse me, I made a mistake on the decimal. I think a lot of you guys would have liked to see 40 million on that, but it's actually 500 million for a faction mining laser upgrade, making you a massive gank target. But again, it is very, very expensive to go for the very best. And the Carpo mining laser upgrade is selling for 75 million, coming in at 82 actually for most, 60 million for the buyers. So this one is also very expensive, with the December spike showing up quite nicely. So I would say at the moment the market is mostly dominated by the patch rather than the pack that CCP has been selling that is so controversial. Alright, well, I think those are the main parts. I could take a quick look at the mining drones maybe. Let's see if I can find not this way apparently. Drones, and then we get the mining drones. I want to take a look at that maybe. So we get a civilian mining drone. That's of course not something. Here is an ice harvesting drone, Tech 1, going for 80,000. Not a lot of demand, as you can see here, so that's pretty cheap and doable. Mining drone 1 costs 10,000 disk, 11k to 10k. That's a little bit more popular, so as a result it's being traded every day and it has a much more narrow margin. But then we get the ice harvesting drone 2. Yeah, it's Tech 2, which is again dominated by oversupply in the production lines. You could say 2.7 million for the sellers, 2 million for the buyers. And then the mining drone 2, a little bit of a bump here at the tail end, but overall, right, average price maybe 750,000, currently selling for 670, buyers coming in at 580. Tech 2 stuff is basically pretty damn cheap at the moment. So yeah, there you go guys, that's it for this Eve Talk. Thank you very much for watching and listening, and as always, I'll see you next time.